Hello and welcome to this drawing tutorial. We're going to be drawing a family portrait in this class. So our first step is choosing the best supplies for the picture and doing our layout. Since this is primarily going to be smooth skin tones, I want a paper with low tooth and that is high quality and thick enough to withstand a lot of medium being layered over the top of it. So I'm going to use a Bristol board, which is a very smooth, polished surface, and I think that it's going to serve me well in this portrait. The process of laying out with multiple people is the same as with a single person, except that since you have 4 heads to contend with, you have that many more measurements, and you also have more comparisons that need to be done from head to head. So this head in relation to this head, in relation to this head, in relation to this head. So now we need to start laying out this photograph. And what I do is I just start by roughly getting down the basic angles and sizes, placement of the heads on the page, and then I refine, do my measuring and everything else from there. But my first step is just to see how it's going to fit. So I start in the top left-hand corner and I work my way down. Generally start with the largest shapes and get smaller, and use loose, light strokes. I'm just trying to eyeball the uppermost lines and the lowermost lines and the width, and putting those on fairly accurately, but still working loose. And you have to keep your lines light so that they're easy to erase and don't bite into the surface of the paper, and so it is going to be difficult to see. So I want to look for intersections in the shapes. For instance, arm to arm here, this shoulder intersecting with the hair here, and just kind of get those on vaguely. Now it's very sketchy. I'm going to erase just a few of those lines, the ones that I'm fairly certain aren't correct. And then I'm going to start straightening things up with measuring. And the first measurement that I want is a head-to-head ratio. So if I zero in here so you can see better, I use the man's head. If I put the paper at the top of his head and mark at the bottom of his chin, I can see that the man and woman's head is almost exactly the same. They're very close to the same width as well, ear to cheek. So let me first make sure that I have the man and woman's head the same. And if I take a measurement of that and compare it to the woman, I'm already fairly accurate. And clean up your lines as you go. I'll make a cleaner roadmap for you to use. When you have the adults' faces in relation to each other, you can replace the children's heads. And I'm still going to use that measurement of the dad's head, remembering that the girl's head was a little bit smaller, but not hugely smaller, just so I can get an idea. But one of the biggest problems that you're going to face is finishing up a wonderful portrait and finding out that your proportions are wrong. So take the time to put them in correctly at the beginning. And as you work, look for intersections like I was saying before. His neck should be in about the center of her head. On my drawing it's way over. So I want my drawing at this point to be as accurate as I can make it. I can make changes afterwards, but if you begin by making changes, you never have a really firm grasp on what it's supposed to look like. I'm going to put his neck in, and I see that the collar should intersect that neckline at about the halfway point, and then her head should come right here. So I'm going to have to move her head over. You might find it helpful to include your directional lines for the nose and the eyes to show the tilt of the face, even at this early level, so that you can see better what the tilt of the head is doing. You're really information gathering. You're getting the roadmap put together so that you can do an accurate depiction of this picture. And that's why you want to start with your landmarks, the largest shapes, and then fill in the details. I'm not going to worry about eyes and features at this point. I just want to get the heads in the right place and the arms, things like that. Get those big shapes right first. Now the major shapes are in place and you can start putting in the finer details. So now's the time when you need to definitely have those directional lines down that show the tilt of the head. And then you go to your photograph and you start making those measurements. Use your paper system and mark off a measurement for the eyes. All of the other features can be placed from an eye length. So here I mark off his eye and I mark an eye. What you often see when heads are at a tilt is that one eye is going to appear larger than the other, even though you know that they're both the same size. And so I have a measure for the small eye here, and when I mark it off, I can see that the distance between the two eyes is the small eye length, and then the larger eye extends above that just slightly. And then it's a large eye length from the edge of the eye to the hairline, and another from the hairline to the ear. When I take those measurements with me back to the paper, I first have to guess, and then just see how it goes from there. And I can just kind of mark these off. That was one eye length. There, that. Big, big, big. Or that will give me the length of the eye. The width of the eye is usually half an eye's length wide. But unfortunately, all of these people, with the exception of the baby, are closing their eyes or half looking down. And so a better way for dealing with that is to mark for myself, like the bottom of the under eye is very prominent, the line underneath the eye. And so I can make that measurement from the top of the eyelid to the bottom of the under eye. And that's approximately half an eye's width. So if I go back to my picture, I divide my eye's length in half, I should be able to fairly accurately describe for myself where those eyes are going to end. And then I draw a rectangle, and within that rectangle I can sketch my eyes. Then go back to this picture again. Alright, and see where the nose falls in terms of the bottom of the eye. My eye length for the large eye, if I turn that on its side and measure down, I wind up on the bottom of the nostril. So from this eye length down, going back to my picture, the nostril is going to end here. And then I go back to the photo and I see where the mouth starts. It's about half an eye from the bottom of the nose to the top of the mouth, and then the mouth itself is another half eye. And so you just measure down like that. You translate all those measurements from the photograph to your drawing very carefully and work it up until you have an accurate placement of all of the features. When you get your drawing to this stage, and you have your lines sketched in, I'm going to double check all of those measurements on this face. Eyes length, eye, good, very good, and do that process on all of the faces. Then also go in with a right angle measuring triangle like this and find any straight lines. So here, for instance, the inner point of the nostril should line up with the inner edge of the eye. So if I take that measurement to my drawing, I should have a straight line from here to here. And there's my nostril just where it should be. Take a step back from your picture after you've laid on the features and see if it looks right, if it feels right. If it doesn't feel right, then double check measurements and see what could be causing it. This chin looks like it's a little bit too short when if I take a step back, so I can make that adjustment and extend it down a little bit. But don't just rely on what looks right to you. Do your measurements and make sure that they are right. Because a filled-in feature that has line and contrast and tone on it, is going to look different than the outline that you have on your paper. Always. That's why you need to take the extra time and measure. Measure and measure and measure. When you're satisfied with your guidelines and your feature placement, then clean up your lines, and then we'll be ready to move on to the next phase of this drawing, which will be putting in the eyes.